Welcome to Italian Innovators. I'm Luca Cottini, and today I'm in the company of Andrea Prencipe, Professor of Organization and Innovation and Rector at the Guido Carli University of Rome. Originally from Apulia, he was trained in management of innovation between Pescara and Pisa and earned his doctorate in the UK at the University of Sussex. He has been visiting professor at the Rotterdam School of Management, the BI School of Management in Oslo, and the Imperial College Business School in London. He has held seminars and classes, among many, at the Harvard Business School, the University of Michigan, the London Business School, and Oxford. His scholarship focuses on the organization of innovative processes, and his experience as a distinguished professional and academic innovator earned him numerous awards. It is a real honor to have you in the show. So thank you, Rector Prencipe, for accepting my invitation.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a great pleasure.
So today we'll explore Guido Carli University as a unique case in the Italian landscape and an experimental platform to reflect upon the role of academia in promoting rooted and dynamic innovation. Starting from an institution of relatively recent foundation, so LUIS was established in the 1970s, we'll examine how a university is formed and develops over time. We'll consider how universities brand themselves, establish a dialogue with new digital technologies, and define their added value in a globally competitive market. We'll also examine the traits of educated in Italy and define an ideal portrait of the 21st century student and innovator. Now, I want to start from the origins of your university. LUIS, whose acronym stands for Libera Università Internazionale degli Studi Sociali, so Free International University of Social Studies, was established in 1974 by a group of Italian entrepreneurs and was first directed by Guido Carli, the president of Confindustria, so the Italian Industrial Association. Carli would be the university president until 1993. And at his death, the institution would be renamed after him. Now, in the 1970s, Italy was in the middle of a turbulent period of economic crisis and divisive terrorism, a decade which historians commonly identify as the lead years. So what moved a group of industrialists to start a university in this context? Why is an academic enterprise a privileged investment to imagine a new future? Now, if you think of the first settlers who established Harvard in 1636, only 6 years after founding Boston, the birth of an institution contains an incredible seed of hope and trust. So what was the founding vision of LUIS?
Thanks for the question, which is very interesting. It allows me to go back in the way and in the perspective, the vision that our founding fathers had. Again, it's very interesting because back in the 70s, you remember Italy and Europe in general were going through conflictual, turbulent times. And founding university probably was not the kind of idea that everybody could have had at that time. But nonetheless, the vision, the perspective that our founding fathers had was, let's try to develop, to create, to build a university focused on social sciences to train the future leaders of the country, which already at that time, they thought about future leadership in terms of international leadership. There was the very interesting twist, which was underlying the building up of LUIS University. The other important dimensions, it also is written in our acronym, that is to say social sciences. Because again, back at that time, there was this idea which was sinking in that only with those with a technical backgrounds, read them as engineers or scientists, could have led the industrial development of the country. As our story, although it's relatively short, because again, we were founded less than 50 years ago, has demonstrated, top managers can only come from social sciences, top leaders. Being the lawyers or political scientists or economists or students or graduates in management. So that's the second dimension. So international, the other one was, as I mentioned, social sciences. The third one had to do with the fact that since its beginning, when we were in fact founded, the idea was to put together already in the classrooms, academics, because we are a university, but at the same time, also representatives from what I call the real world. So being in corporations, public administration, the world of entrepreneurships, of entrepreneurs, professionals, and the likes. And this is something that has stayed with us ever since we were founded. If you've come to LUIS, actually, if you came a few minutes ago, I was actually welcoming a former Lewis alumnus who's now CEO of Fincantieri, who comes regularly to teach our students. In this case, it was conversing about his leadership style. So a classroom with students coming from law, from political science, economics, finance, management, marketing, and the likes. But he regularly teaches in Lewis. And like him, there are other professionals, again, entrepreneurs, or can be diplomats, or can be professional lawyers who come in regularly to teach together with us academics. So that's another important dimension, a distinguishing feature of Lewis. It was already thought of about 50 years ago, and now it is fundamentally important. It's part and parcel of our educational model. So in a nutshell, Lewis, already in the vision of our founding fathers, was going to be, according to, again, their vision, a special, unique university. And I think we are fulfilling the vision. We've become more international. As a matter of fact, beginning of this week, the Financial Times rankings went out for the Master in Management, and our Master in Management went up over 20 positions. Now we are top 50 in the world, and we are first in the world for career progression, which is an important achievement. So international, second, social sciences, and third is, as I mentioned, is this virtuous relationship, the virtuous binomial, academia and, again, real world. This made Lewis unique at that time, and still it's making it somehow different, distinctive, unique.
This is really fascinating because it's an institution that breathes with two lungs, the strategic and humanistic lung, but also kind of the academic and the real world context, as you described. Lewis today really aspires to foster this rooted and dynamic knowledge at the same time through social studies, and its key areas are economy, finance, law, political science, and management, but also with this international horizon. So the dialogue with the marketplace and the centrality of foreign languages as bridging points, really, to connect education to the international business world. So how would you describe, or you already talked about it, but how would you describe the difference between Lewis and other academic institutions in Italy?
I'll try to use a few keywords to offer specific perspective on Lewis, to make sure that we come up with an articulated, description, illustration on who we are, what we do, and why we're doing it. The first keyword is entrepreneurship. As you mentioned, we're founded by Confindustria, a group of entrepreneurs. We are part of the, as we call it, the large Confindustria galaxy, and Confindustria is the Italian largest industry association. And being founded by entrepreneurs, has laid another important dimension of our foundation. That is to say, if you come to Lewis, you really can breathe this entrepreneurial atmosphere. We make sure that our students acquire an entrepreneurial spirit. Our colleagues, the academics, but also the staff, have this entrepreneurial dimension built into the DNA. So entrepreneurship is not only a subject that we teach in our university, in our programs, but is a dimension which is pervasive in university. So entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial approach is something that is here and is distinguishing as far as Lewis is concerned. So first keyword is entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial spirit. The second has a lot to do with our educational model, because our educational model, by the way, education also starts with an E. We label it inquiry-based. What do we mean by inquiry-based? So we would like our students to become inquirers, and by which we mean something very simple. Universities and academics are driven by a logic of inquiry. We academics, we are driven when it comes to generating and disseminating knowledge. We are driven by questions. We try to address questions, and then our outcomes, our products are research papers. They can be a report, also patents. This kind of logic allows academics, researchers, to always question their own assumptions, which is fundamentally important as an academic. But what we have realized, and that what we are implementing at Lewis, is that this logic is going to be pervasive also, and is already pervasive in all our programs. By which I mean that we attempt to make sure that students acquire this logic. In fact, yesterday I met the new students And I said to them, you managed to get into Lewis. You're selected to become a Lewis student because you were very good at addressing questions. So to offer, provide, generate answers to questions. Now that you are in Lewis, you're going to be learning to make questions. Making questions is fundamentally important, especially now, because our students, when they will graduate, they will live in a context which are always discontinuous, complex, problematic to be framed and addressed. And if you are unable to make questions, then it's going to be difficult for them, to address, to identify solutions to such problems. So again, the second keyword is inquiry, is the logic of inquiry. Inquiry-based model is the educational model that, in fact, makes sure that students are center stage in the university. They do not receive information, but they become, the real actor of their own educational path. And to do so, they must be equipped with intellectual tools that make sure that enable them to ask questions, also to find solutions, also to address those questions. But first, they'll be able to frame problems, to ask questions.
One of our most contemporary problems has been the pandemic, which has brought a lot of pressure and a lot of novelties to academic institutions, revealing the need for a more dynamic and integrated communication of knowledge beyond the traditional silos of compartments or departments, also establishing a more mature dialogue with digital technologies and placing universities within a new broader horizon of global competition. So how does a university renew itself? How does a university become or create a brand of itself? And how does a local university reach the world as its potential audience?
Well, let me continue to use keywords to address your question. I've used words that start with an E, two words, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial spirit, or approach, and inquiry-based, and therefore inquirer. Let me switch to I now. I already used one word to depict Lewis, which starts with an I, which is international, as it is written also in our acronym. And the second word that I'd like to use, which starts with an I, is interdisciplinarity. As I mentioned, we are a social sciences university. So we focus on social sciences. So economics, it's law, it's political science, sociology, marketing, finance, management, organizations, and the likes. But what we'll be doing in Lewis is to really focus on our social sciences approach, which means that all our programs are interdisciplinary by nature. They've got an interdisciplinary DNA. So which means that if you study, say, law, then you're supposed also to take exams in economics and the other way around. In order to maintain our uniqueness and nurture such uniqueness, we have introduced relatively recently other subjects. First and foremost, as you can imagine, is data science. So we are a social science university, but we do have a research team, a research group that works on data science, artificial intelligence, and the likes. So again, if you come to Lewis and to study economics or management or law, political science, you're going to acquire some digital skills. You're going to be able to program. This does not mean, however, of course, in the spirit of reinforcing a social science university with an interdisciplinary approach, does not mean that if you study law, you'll become a programmer. But you study law, you learn about programming as well. If you study economics, you learn about programming because it is important. Given the relevance of data science and big data and the likes, you're going to be able to interact, to dialogue, to speak, understand, value experts of data science. That's one important dimension of our interdisciplinary approach. The second dimension, which has a lot to do with interdisciplinarity, of course, is another subject which is closer probably to social sciences than data science is to social sciences, which is all the area of humanities. The last few years, we have introduced literature, comparative literature, history of music, history of archaeology, general philosophy. And again, if you come to study economics Lewis, you can also read this subject. And then the rationale underlying it has not much to do with the fact that you as an economist or you as a professional manager or a professional lawyer, you would like to speak with someone who is an expert in literature. That may be the case also. But the reason why we encourage our students to take these courses and in fact, they're very popular, by the way, is that if you study literature, if you study philosophy, if you study history, arguably you are able to develop and refine your critical thinking skills, which are again fundamentally important. And this, of course, pair with what I mentioned early on. That is to say, we try to make sure that our students learn how to ask questions, so to be critical, to be skeptical about it. And then humanities are fundamentally important for that. I was actually going through a very recent publication by the OECD. It was reporting on an analysis of a set of tests that have done across schools and universities to understand whether or not universities are able to teach critical thinking skills to students. And guess what? Those who study and read humanities are much ahead of the others. So that's why our idea of developing, strengthening our interdisciplinary approach was further supported. So internationalization, first I. Second I is interdisciplinarity. The third I is innovation. As I mentioned, the entrepreneurial spirit pervades Lewis. And by definition, if you're an entrepreneur, you are supposed to experiment. You're supposed to test out things. You're supposed to innovate. We teach innovation. We teach innovation management. Of course, I'm biased here, but we make sure that students have this kind of innovative approach. Be open to other perspectives. Be open to other ideas. Be open to ideas that come from people who are not, from your country, from your culture, from your religions, and the likes. And as a matter of fact, relatively recently, we have made sure that our international dimension, as you mentioned, how did you go from local, being a local university to a global, to have a global outreach? We pressed ahead with the internationalization of programs, and not only programs, but also faculty. Now we count about 17 nationalities in our faculty. We've got about 85 nationalities in the student population. And more than 50% of our programs are taught in English. Of course, we have some programs which are taught in Italian, but increasingly our university launches and manages programs which are taught in English. And in fact, they do have an international DNA built into it.
And if I may add I would say integration, so an integrated form of knowledge that is able to connect a past heritage, so the deposit of culture of the humanities, with a forward-looking attitude. So this look toward the future that innovation generates, or this attitude toward creating new things. This is quite interesting also in the integration of traditional models of knowledge with the new data science that our digital world has introduced. Now, the label that most commonly identifies a model or a framework of success and innovation in Italy is the label Made in Italy, which is where we associate an Italian product with an aura of quality, beauty, and taste. What is interesting is that in your work, you often reframe this formula through the expression educated in Italy, which identifies Italy's original model of knowledge in a complex mix of groundedness and dynamism, contextual knowledge, and diversity of thought. So what does educated in Italy mean? What is the added value of Italian education, and why should a 20th century American consider it as desirable or even preferable?
Oh, well, that's a great question, because educated in Italy is not as well known as made in Italy, but it's very much at the basis of made in Italy. As you rightly mentioned, when we think about made in Italy, we think about beauty, we think about passion for details, we think about passion for diversity, we think about ability to relate the past with the future, ability to maintain an innovative and creative approach, even if you are producing, a traditional product, and finding some kind of novelty in something which is truly traditional. Educated in Italy is the foundation of Made in Italy. So it's very much it's a lot to do with the way we make sure that students learn. By the way, I don't say teach. I say make sure that students learn. As scholars, as professors, we need to come to terms that when it comes to learning is a two-dimension process. I learn a lot when I say teach, but students, and especially now in this educational model that we have at Lewis, are really center stage in the model. And because that's the key element in all the Italian production that we identify as made in Italy, because made in Italy is down to a brilliant entrepreneur with a fantastic idea, but he was or she was the actor at the time. We would like that our students become the actor of their educational path. And so that passion that moves entrepreneur of Made in Italy can also be found in Lewis. We make sure to strengthen it. That's something that students have to have. Something that students, when it comes to decide what to study, first and foremost, they need to think about how to study the subject. Is the approach. And then, of course, educating in Italy means also being immersed in beautiful campuses, in ancient building, living building. All our campuses, they look like museums, but they host students who have plenty of ideas, plenty of energy. This energy only needs a few steps to become something important, fantastic for their careers. So educating in Italy is something that we've been working a lot, we're focusing a lot, and it's a lot to do with the interdisciplinarity, make sure that humanistic thinking is there together with data science, together with the social sciences, but also the international outlook that allows and has allowed a lot of Italian products and service to reach out to a larger public than just the Italian one. So since we do not have as yet a sharp definition of made in Italy, the same holds true for educated in Italy, something we are discovering while we're doing it.
So sort of an organic connectedness of subjects, and also an attempt to, this two-way communication is an attempt to maintain a living timelessness, not a museum, but something that keeps being fresh, endures being fresh. I want to talk about a recent article that you wrote for Corriere della Sera, where you pointed to the 19th century intellectual and Saint John Henry Newman as a model for rethinking universities in the aftermath of the pandemic. Now, in dialogue with him, you stress the nature of universities as sites of personal communication of knowledge and diverse piazzas, in his words, aggregating strangers in one place and making them whole in dialogue with each other. So this communication that you were talking about. Now, this situated or like on-site communication and this contact with otherness that universities guarantee represent for you the source not just of tolerance and independence, but also of new cognitive models, new digital translations of tradition, and what you call a new educational space-time. In this context, as Newman did in the opening of his idea of a university, can you trace a profile of the ideal 21st century student that a university should aspire to form?
We can attempt to define profiles of students and therefore graduates, which has a lot to do with the way we are shaping our educational action, as I call it, at Lewis University, which of course descends from our educational model. And in fact, I like to label our students and future graduates with an oxymoron. The oxymoron is our students are supposed to become specialized generalists, by which I mean that each of them is supposed to develop his or her own vertical dimension of knowledge, of competencies, being it international law or finance or consumer marketing or innovation. But on the other hand, if we come to terms with the fact that the challenges that our graduates will address, will try to deal with, are going to be increasingly complex, multifaceted, problematic to be framed, surely they won't belong to any disciplines, then each and every specialist has to have a more generalist vision. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need to throw away all the specialism and specialties and specializations, not at all. That's why oxymoron, which is my favorite concept, you've got to be a specialist, specialized professional, but at the same time you have to have this generalist vision that allows you to interact with other people, frame value, other contributions, because the challenges they're going to be facing and hopefully framing require this generalist approach. Then it may mean you need a specialist or more than one specialist to identify the solution, to solve the problem. But it is important to have this vision. So ideally, being a specialized generalist is going to be paying off. But then, of course, it needs to be articulated per each profession that each of them are going to be building. When I'm interviewed by the press and I'm asked whether I can identify the next 10 professions in the next 10 years, I say, well, I don't know. And it's intellectually dishonest to tell students or whoever, it's going to be computer engineering or being, a financial analyst or whatever, or data scientist. We don't know. And the rate of change in terms of profession is extremely high. And so is the rate of obsolescence of knowledge. So our take in Lewis is to offer students a set of skills, competence, the kind of bricolage approach, entrepreneurial approach students can put together, you mentioned, integrate to build their own toolbox, which is going to be a fairly rich toolbox, because if we pursue the idea of interdisciplinarity, it's going to be an internationalization. Of course, there's to be a nice, rich toolbox, but with one caveat. It has never to be full, because if the rate of obsolescence is very high, one other important skill of students, and I tell students time and again, is they need to be able to, as much as to learn, they need to be able to unlearn. So the challenge for them is to develop, create, build their own toolbox or their own toolboxes, but at the same time make sure that it's always half empty, because there's always something to be learned, and maybe also particularly distant and distinct from what they've been learning. So that's the challenge: is learn to learn and learn to unlearn.
Thank you. This is really fascinating. And along these lines, I want to close with a final question, which relates to another article that you wrote recently in honor of the eyewear entrepreneur Leonardo Del Vecchio. In the article, you trace really an interesting profile of the Italian innovator in dialogue with the 6 memos for the new millennium of Italo Calvino, the 6th lesson on the future of literature that the Italian writer composed yet never delivered for a presentation at Harvard in 1985. He would die a few weeks before. Now, in an ideal conversation with Calvino, you locate the strength of the innovator in the ability to reconcile opposites. So local, global, visible, invisible, capitalism, family. So the passion for oxymoron that you described. And you also locate the strength of the innovator in the ability to combine what you define sapere, saper fare, saper essere, e saper diventare. So to know how to be, and to know how to become. Against this context, can you outline a profile of the 21st century Italian innovator in the industry or in education?
We're nearly there. The Italian innovator of the 20th century is, by all means, what Calvino wrote 40 years ago. In fact, there's always been, but it will always be, and probably this idea that you mentioned that we found together with Massimo Sideri in Italo Calvino's work, the 6 memos for the next millennium, which is this millennium, has a lot to do with the idea of being able to combine in a virtuous way things, concepts, idea, information, knowledge are apparently distant. So the special for oxymoron that you mentioned that I have is something that pervades Calvino's work, especially the 6 memos for the next millennium. And I believe that true innovators are, true Italian innovators, but this I think holds true for all innovators, are those that are always able to combine in a very creative way things that are totally different. The true innovator is someone who can see, as what Calvino was writing in his chapter on visibility, is something that you can see, something that others do not see, by merging, combining, putting together, linking, connecting things that may seem disparate, different. That's the quintessential dimension of Italian innovators.
And you seem to have traced also the profile of the intellectual interlegere, so the ability to read dots together, not as single dots, so specificity only, but as dots that are part of a constellation, specificity within a more general outlook. Thank you very much for this truly enlightening conversation. We started from the case of a unique Italian institution to explore the driving forces that move universities, their impact on the present age, and their contribution in shaping new models of innovation. And we did this by placing academic institutions in dialogue with the market, the global context, and the new generations. Thank you, Rector Prencipe, for your time and all your work.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been really enjoyable conversation, which I think and I hope all will enjoy listening to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for watching. If you like this presentation, this interview, I invite you to subscribe to this channel or the newsletter on the webpage of the show at www.italianinnovators.com to receive notifications of new episodes and know more about this project. You can also follow me on my LinkedIn profile or on Instagram at Italian Innovators for updates, news, and additional materials. Thank you for your support. Arrivederci e alla prossima.